Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
Well, Happy New Year. We made it to 2026. It's now 5:07, and good morning. A new day dawns here in Washington, D.C. and around the world. And the calendar changes, but what really changes? I don't know. We can talk about it. Do you have resolutions? Do you have plans to rejuvenate? Maybe reaffirm? Maybe start completely fresh? Well, we can talk about that, too. Coming up at 7:05, Gabriella Hoffman, friend of the program, and the Independent Women's Forum director of Independent Women's Center for Energy and Conservation, as energy is a big part of economic renewal here in America, as the Trump administration continues to move forward, utilizing the resources we have here in this country that don't involve wind and the sun. I mean, not exclusively, that is. And then at 8:35, another friend of the program, Cully Stimson, author of Rogue Prosecutors. We'll talk about lawfare and these Soros-backed NGOs all around the country, but most specifically here in D.C., teaching them how to sneak onto juries and rig trials against Trump. Yeah, that's a thing. And Cully will give us the details. By the way, speaking of Cully Stimson, one of his good friends and colleagues for many years at the Heritage Foundation, joins me all morning long, friend of the program. We're just surrounded by friends this morning, as we should be on New Year's Day. This one has that lilting Southern accent, Hans von Spakovsky. Good morning, Hans. Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year to you. You know, my wife asked me, well, how are we going to spend New Year's Day? And I said, well, I'm spending it with my old friend Larry O'Connor.
So, in other words, you'll be sleeping.
Right.
Much of the day. You're going to miss all the great football.
Well, I actually saw stuff last night, including one of the Mannings, another Manning playing in that Texas game. And, boy, it's like that whole family, they're all in football.
That is exciting for them, for the Manning family. It's hard not to root for them, although I am a Michigan fan. So that was heartbreaking that Texas beat my Wolverines. However, later in the night, every Wolverine fan was redeemed because Ohio State lost. See, our favorite teams are Michigan and whoever's playing Ohio State. So we were all with the U last night, although I did not stay up to watch the end of it. I didn't stay up to watch New Year's Eve. Well, we were trying to figure this out during our pre-show meeting, Hans. I made it to 10 p.m. because, we have a pretty early wake-up call.
Right.
But honestly, even before doing morning radio, I can't remember the last. Well, I guess the last one was 2018, I want to say. I joined the Plants and the Gorkas, Katie and Seb. Katie well from working with her at Heritage for many years. And Chris Plant and Tricia and Meredith and I, we all did a big New Year's Eve party at the Trump Hotel back in the heyday of the first term. I think that might have been the last time I actually saw midnight on New Year's Eve. Can you remember?
I bet that was fun. Listen, the last time I did it was a number of years ago at a club, unfortunately no longer open, in Alexandria, in which they had a big band, a swing band, and they were entertaining as if we were at the Cotton Club in New York in 1930. It was all big band music. Everybody was dressed up, and people were eating dinner and then in between courses dancing. It was great.
Was that at that old supper? There's a supper club in Alexandria.
It was called the Carlisle Club.
The Carlisle. In fact, they were advertisers here on WMAL for a while there, and Meredith and I had a dinner there. It's very cool. Is it still going on, Carlisle? Because I didn't know how COVID hit them.
No, unfortunately, COVID, I think, destroyed their business. But that was fun because, like I said, everyone was dressed to the nines, and people were dancing. It was a lot of fun.
I often wonder if we could return to the heyday of the supper club. I know it's of an era gone by, but whenever you watch any of those Rat Pack movies or predating those movies from the 30s and 40s, it's just I'm jealous of all of those people going to those places with bands and dancing and dinner and cocktails. I mean, Mar-a-Lago these days sort of has that vibe.
It does, but listen, I have exactly the same feeling. I watch those 1930s movies, the women in these beautiful gowns, the men all in their tuxedos, drinking cocktails, eating, dancing to this big band music, and I wish there were more places like that today.
Well, you wonder. You wonder if we see the pendulum swing. They always say everything old is new again, I suppose. So maybe we'll see it come back. Although it has to come back with that classic music. I remember in the 90s, there was sort of a revival of swing dancing for
Yes.
Gen X. Remember that movie Swingers that came out? And it was like there was sort of a resurgence. And in fact, at my first wedding to my ex-wife, we got married in '97, and we had a swing band at our wedding performing for all of our guests. We actually did a bunch of swing dancing, and they played all of those old classics.
Well, listen, it's kind of funny how identical
Really?
our lives have been, because when my wife and I got married, we wanted 1930s, 1940s big band music, and that's what we got.
Well, although you're still happily married to that beautiful
Well,
wife.
that is true.
And I am happily married, too. We just, you go through transitions in life. Speaking of transitions in life, you, of course, were a longtime senior fellow over at the Heritage Foundation, and you were in charge of the Election Law Center there. But you recently announced that you've moved on from Heritage, and now you've hung out your shingle, as it were.
Yeah, I'm a free agent. Now, I guess I probably can't expect a multi-million-dollar contract like those NFL and baseball
different
guys.
kind of free agent, or even college players these days, actually.
But I am a free legal agent now. But listen, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. In fact, this past Monday, I actually had a piece at Fox News on the birthright citizenship issue, which is up before the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm gonna keep writing and analyzing all the legal issues coming up. And boy, there are a lot of them.
There are. In fact, as we move on this morning, I want to pick your brain on some of the big ones. I mean, just for me, the birthright citizenship issue, the census issue, whether we count non-citizens or more specifically illegal non-citizens in this country for the purpose of apportionment. Also, we're expecting a Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act, which could radically change redistricting and apportionment in many of the southern states. There's a whole lot going on that's right up your wheelhouse, Hans. That's why we always love having on your show. And of course, we love the Heritage Foundation here on the program, and we utilize a lot of their experts. But also, as I have always said to you and Cully joining us later, who is no longer with Heritage, your minds, your positions, your analysis, always welcome here on O'Connor and Company. So no matter what you're affiliated with, as long as you don't, listen, I know how DC works sometimes, but please don't work for one of those Soros groups, okay?
Oh,
Hans,
my gosh.
Please. I mean, I'm just saying.
I'd leave the country before I did that.
Actually, our country would be finished if that ever happened. That would be one of the signs of the Armageddon. So we will talk to Hans about all that stuff coming up, and also talk about New Year's and what we expect in 2026, not just in those decisions with regard to voting rights and voter integrity, but also just personally what to look forward to in 2026 and how we all might be able to sort of transcend the politics of the day and maybe make our lives better regardless of what's going on around us. We're called for that, aren't we? We'll get into all of that stuff as the morning develops. And coming up in a moment, a remarkable display on the Mall as the Trump administration's 250th celebration organization showed us what might be in store for us in this special 250th year of the Declaration of Independence. A show on the Washington Monument like none other. We'll share a little bit of it with you coming up in just a moment. First, though, it's 5:15, WMAL traffic and weather. Every 10 minutes, first on the files with Vanya Brown in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center. I don't know about you, Hans, but I'm in the mood for a little Glenn Miller this morning. Kind of love the big band sound. Cal Thomas yesterday, we talked to him every Wednesday, and I'd mentioned something about staying up till midnight and ringing in the new year, and he went right to Guy Lombardo.
Oh, yeah.
Guy Lombardo. He hasn't been around for New Year's Eve since Carter was president, has he?
No, I don't think he has. That was when I quit watching those New Year's Eve shows when they switched from Guy Lombardo to all these terrible rock bands, even though I like rock.
Well, there was a slim time there when Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve was kind of cool, and they had some really great bands. Then it just became schlock. In fact, my mind was blown when I discovered that they most of the Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve was recorded in a studio like 2 months before New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
but
the Class. Those shows, I'll tell you, I think what the New Year's Eve shows now lack, frankly, is the class.
Yeah.
They're just not as classy as when the big bands were playing, particularly, and you know this because you spent so much time in New York, when the big bands would play in the big hotel ballrooms and broadcast live.
Well, it's true. I used to be in New York, but I don't remember that far back, I guess, when they used to do that. But I spent one New Year's Eve in Times Square. I feel like everybody should do it once. It's just sort of an American cultural experience to be in Times Square for New Year's Eve. But I'll tell you, it was a nightmare. It was insane. Anytime you're in New York with that many people all crowded into one place and half of them are too drunk to stand, it's not going to end well. And I'll never forget, I was working in the theater at the time. I was, probably a teenager still. I was either 19 or 20. And as the theater, Times Square is right there with all the Broadway theaters in the theater district. So all the shows are letting out around 10:45, 10:30, 11:45. And here are these people who got all dressed up to the nines and, spent a lot of money to go out to dinner and then see a Broadway show on New Year's Eve. And then they probably thought, and then we'll stroll on to Times Square and we'll watch. It was insane. Everybody was already so overpacked and overcrowded with crowds spilling into 45th, 46th Street where all the Broadway theaters are. And these people were like running for their lives, trying to get out of the mayhem, and they couldn't get a cab. Not advised. If you're going to do Times Square, don't add a Broadway show to the mix at all.
Well, and just keep in mind with the new mayor, remember, Times Square used to be a horrible pit. It got cleaned up by recent mayors, but the current mayor is so anti-police and everything else that I'm afraid it's going to decay again.
Oh, we'll go right back to it. And he is officially the new mayor. He was sworn in at midnight. Zohran Mamdani was. We're going to talk about that a little later, too. But you mentioned Class on New Year's Eve, Hans. And if you were hanging around the National Mall last night, you were treated to something very special. Brand new presentation, this of the Freedom 250, I should say. That's the nonpartisan organization that is delivering the celebrations for the nation's 250th birthday. And they did that really cool thing with the specialized projectors that shot a cinematic, artistic representation of the history of our country onto the Washington Monument with a narration. I'll play a little bit of it for you.
America. The New World. Our nation began not as an idea invented in the minds of men, but as a land discovered. When Christopher Columbus looked west across the endless ocean, he sailed for glory, for gain, and for God.
It starts with Christopher Columbus, but then goes through the entire history of the country. About 2.5 minutes in, we get to the Declaration of Independence.
By the hand of Providence and the strength of determined men and women, the United States of America was born. And with her, words that echo throughout eternity. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
No, it really is beautiful. And the monument is projected with the image of what looks like the color of parchment paper. And you heard the sound of the quill scratching against the paper and then these words. are inscribed against the monument in this beautiful video presentation. It really is chilling, and it's going to be running throughout the week until Sunday night. So if you want to see this, just a glimpse of what we have in store for us this 250th anniversary year.
Yeah, we're already. My wife and I are already making plans. We're going to go down there to see
you are?
that. Oh yeah. Listen, do you recall a number of years ago they were celebrating? I think it was the moon landing,
the Apollo landing. Yes, absolutely. It's the same idea. Yeah,
and it was the same thing. They did a projection of the Saturn V rocket taking off.
Yeah.
The mall was completely full of people, but it was great. I mean, it was quite an experience.
It's just the beginning of many celebrations this year. I'm hoping to go to most of them as well here in Washington. We need to take advantage of this. We're very fortunate to be living in this area this 250th year. And can I tell you a secret? It's 5/23, so it's New Year's Day. No one's listening. Everyone's hungover. Just between you and me, Hans. I was actually in conversations with the producers to do the voiceover for that projection that we just heard.
Cool.
We couldn't figure out the schedule because of the holidays and everything, and get it out. But they said they want to talk to me for other events that are going on this year. So hopefully I'll be able to do one of the voiceovers for one of those things. The dude they got though is fantastic. He's got one of those movie trailer voices of God, right? That's really good stuff, and hopefully yours truly will be able to participate as well. Well, what a time to be alive here in America and in our nation's capital. Happy New Year, everybody. It's 5/23. All right, coming up, if you're like me, you can't break into a brand new year without knowing what Hans von Spakovsky has resolved. So we'll ask him what his New Year's resolutions are. If he makes New Year's resolutions, I'll share what mine are and what the trends happen to be for people looking for renewal and maybe even self-improvement coming into 2026. Keep it here. It's 5:30. Happy New Year. It's 5:37 right now on our New Year's Day celebration. It's O'Connor and Company, and coming up at 7:05, Gabriella Hoffman, Director of Independent Women's Center for Energy and Conservation, will join the conversation. And then at 8:35, Cully Stimson, author of Rogue Prosecutors, How Radical Soros Lawyers Are Destroying America's Communities. Plenty to talk with Cully about then, and we've got plenty to talk with Hans von Spakovsky about all morning long. Do you feel? I feel like we have elevated your profile, Hans, to such a point where most people can now pronounce your name without tripping over it and stumbling.
That is very true, although I still have problem occasionally with Fox hosts not being able to pronounce it correct. Hey, listen, it's a typical name for somebody who was born and raised in Alabama.
That's right. That's plenty. Oh, you're one of the Alabama von Spakovskys.
That is right. By the way, Larry, I thank you for inviting me on. And, you said earlier that, well, nobody's listening to the show now because it's New Year's Day. Actually, all the people who are just getting home from their New Year's Eve parties are listening to us as they're driving home.
Oh, you're right. I joke about that because I know how wide our listenership is. And we do. This is one of those mornings where we have that nexus of people stumbling home right now. They may have even taken a nap after their reverie and then got up and said, oh, we better get home now, dear. And you still got those, incredibly dedicated members of the military who, doesn't matter what the holiday is, they're rise and shiners and they're out there and they've got their duty and they're going to get to work. No. We got plenty of people hanging on every word. Hans, so do you play the whole resolution game? Do you sort of reset I like the idea of, I know it's artificial and today's really no different than yesterday, but I sort of like a hard reset. I like having this forced moment in time where everybody stops, assesses where they are and their habits and how they are and whether they can improve themselves in the coming days.
Oh, no, I agree. And in fact, I do that. I actually made two resolutions for this year. One was to really spend more look, you and I, so many of us spend so much time working, and I actually made a resolution to try to actually have more fun. Go to more concerts, take weekend vacations, things like that. But the other one, very long-term one, Larry, is for many years I've been trying to get myself to finally write a book about my father and mother's experiences during World War II, which would also make a great movie.
Yes.
And I think I'm going to finally work on that. Listen, if they turn it into a movie, I will get you to be the narrator for it.
Oh, I would love that. I'd be honored. And you can speak with my management about the fee. But Hans, this is great. Because I remember years ago, we went out to dinner, and you were telling, Meredith and I were hanging on every word when you were sort of telling us the story of your parents and your life. And I remember saying, this is a book. You've got to write this book. So
right.
give our listeners sort of the thumbnail here of the story we're talking about.
Well, look, my mother was German. She grew up in Nazi Germany, unfortunately. My father was a white Russian, and he fled communism in Russia, actually fought in the revolution there. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like the Dr. Zhivago movie. Mm-hmm. Settled in Yugoslavia, and then when the Nazis invaded there, World War II, he was actually part of the resistance. And in 46, when the communists, Tito, started taking over, he had to flee once again. And it was literally a friend of his called him at his home in where he was living in Yugoslavia and said, "Your name's on a list.
Yeah,
you better get out." And he packed a bag and walked out his front door. And it was things like that. As he said, it's things that are always much better to remember than to live through.
And then, of course, people might be listening and saying, hold on, Hans isn't like 78 and 80 years old. What's going on here? How does this timeline work? Your parents were a little older than normal when they had
They
you.
were. My father was quite a bit older than my mother, although it didn't stop them from having 5 kids. And I was the fourth of 5. So that is why it is actually possible that I had a father who fought in the Russian Revolution.
In the Russian Revolution. That, it is really amazing if you think about it. I want to say this last year, a gentleman died who had lived in Virginia who was biologically the son of one of the presidents. I can't remember which one, but one of the presidents from the early 19th century.
He was the grandson. He was the grandson of, I think it was President Tyler, who was president in the 1840s. And each of them, his father, his grandfather, had successively married at a very elderly age and then had lots of kids.
And fathered children with a younger bride, all that jazz. I know it is amazing when you think about it, when you start looking at how generations sort of hold hands and can move from one to the next in such a remarkable way like that. And so that's a great, I love that you're going to hunker down and write that book. That's fantastic. And I've got to assume that a lot of your research is already done.
Well, some of it is. I actually, a year and a half ago, visited the city in now Poland. It was part of Germany where my mother grew up, where she was unfortunately there during the Russian siege of the city at the end of World War II. And the Russians, this is something for people to understand in the Ukrainian war. The Russians fight today like Genghis Khan and the Mongols did 1,000 years ago. They are vicious, cruel, mean when they are fighting. It's very different from American forces. In fact, listen, when my father fled Yugoslavia, he figured the safest place in Europe would be where there were American troops. So he headed for the U.S. occupied sector of Germany, and that was because he knew the difference between the Russians and the Americans.
That's right, and everyone around the world knows that as well, and hopefully we'll continue to know that going into this year and beyond. All right, more. I didn't know that we were going to veer into this, but that's fantastic. Not everyone can write a book as their New Year's resolution, so we'll talk about some other ideas for New Year's resolutions, self-improvement, and goals that you might want to hit. And I'll look back in the rearview mirror because I had a few resolutions that I talked about 1 year ago today, and thankfully I actually met them, which is kind of extraordinary. I hardly ever meet my resolutions, so we'll get into that coming up in a moment. It's 5:44.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
It's New Year's Day, and of course you spent a lot of time sort of reflecting on your life and what you did last year. and whether it lived up to the hype. And then, of course, you turn the page and start looking forward to what your goals are for next year. Meredith and I, Hans, spent quite a good amount of time looking back on this last year of 2025 because it was, on a personal level, it was pretty momentous, actually. We had some major life events occur, and not all of them good ones, actually, sadly. I think all of us were, of course, touched by the assassination of Charlie Kirk, even though that, many of us knew Charlie or interacted with Charlie. A lot of people will say, oh, he was such a good friend. I won't pretend that he was, but he was definitely somebody that I worked with and was friendly with and did a couple of events with. But that still stands out to me as sort of one of those life-altering moments that 2025 will always be remembered for on sort of a broad macro scale,
Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, it was just such a terrible tragedy, and it's unfortunate that last year will be remembered for that. But Larry, I think you were saying that you actually, I think, puts you in the top 5% of Americans. You actually were able to achieve a number of the resolutions you made last year.
I did.
I got to hear about that.
So I had, in my personal life, I had 3 resolutions. The first one was a bit of a cheat because I had already started the process. But like you, I resolved to write a book last year. And by the time I hit New Year's, I had already written half of it.
Wow.
But I finished it, and I had my first book published, a nonfiction book about the 2024 presidential election, and most importantly, about the media and the media's malpractice. It's called Shameless Liars. It hit #1 in a couple of categories on Amazon, so go and buy it, everybody. It's a great book and talks about the media and the origins of the First Amendment and all that stuff, the freedom of the press. And then I was so inspired, I ended up writing a short little novella as well, a fiction book about corruption in the federal government. So I wanted to write a book, and so I wrote 1.5 books, really, a novella for the second book. And then my other 2 personal resolutions. One, I had some financial issues in our life. You know how it is when you're sort of working hard and you just, you're not really paying attention to your budgeting and all the things going on. And we had to do quite a reset here to just get a handle on all of our finances, mostly because we had to pay for a wedding last year.
I understand that. I have 3 kids, and 2 of them got married recently.
Oh, you married 2 in 25. Wow. I didn't realize that. So between the 2 of us, we have 3 new marriages born in 25. Congratulations to you, Dad. But that sort of made Meredith and I sort of had to get all of our paperwork together. We had a lot of different expenses and a lot of different things going on that were just, it wasn't organized and it wasn't really, we didn't have that. So I got that taken care of. And then the third one was a personal physical goal that I had for myself. I've never run a marathon before. And last year, in January, I decided this year I'm going to run the Marine Corps Marathon. And I had resolved to do that in years past, but I always had some sort of injury or something get in the way of my training. But this year I did it, and I finished the Marine Corps Marathon.
I got to tell you that's very impressive. Look, I'm not...
For a man my age.
Well,
Say
look, I'm not out of shape, but I'm not sure I could walk the Marine Corps Marathon.
Well, I walked a couple of the miles. I promise you that. So that was kind of cool to actually look back and say, oh, we did it, and hit those resolutions. It is interesting though. Whenever a year ago, my dad had suffered a fall right after Christmas, so we were just sort of getting into he was hospitalized at this time. Little did we know that would be sort of the beginning of the end for him. By the first week in March, he had passed away. None of us in my family were expecting that because he was strong as a horse, except for his dementia, which complicated everything, by the way, when he had his accident and then the physical rehabilitation that just did not go well. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, that stands out as sort of a major life event for us. Not just the wedding, the marriage of my daughter, and then the passing of my father all happened in 25. And no matter what plans you make and no matter what kind of resolutions you make, you never know what life hands you. I guess the best thing is to just be prepared.
Well, so yeah, and you went from the depths to the heights, didn't you?
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what life is all about, right?
It is.
Yeah. So now you got to reset and plan for what the next year is going to be and what your goals are going to be next year. And we know you're going to write your book, which is very exciting and very cool. And I have a hunch you're also going to have some side projects going into the year now that you're a free agent and your legal analysis and expertise can be utilized. I'm hoping people from the administration are calling and saying, hey, Hans, we got some pretty big fights here with regard to voter integrity. Would love to have you on board.
Right, and that's going to be a key issue. We're into a very big election year, and what happens in November is going to say a lot about whether this country continues down a good path or whether we reverse things and go back to, oh my gosh, the Biden year.
Oh, good Lord, God forbid. The question is these two little terms of Donald Trump, the outliers and the unicorn moments, but we're going to continue that steady march toward Marxism? Or is this a trend going and swinging the pendulum back in the other direction? You're right, November will tell us that, although there's a lot of decisions to be made this spring that will tell us what November looks like, because we don't even know what the districts are yet that are going to be up for re-election this November. So there's no way to know how that election might go. But speaking of that, I want to talk to you a little later about the SAVE Act. I saw Congressman Byron Donalds talking about the SAVE Act in Congress, about voter integrity, and I suspect you might have a thought or two about it.
I have a lot of thoughts about that bill, which Congress ought to pass and the president ought to sign.
Well, there you go. That's the executive summary, but we'll get into the details of it with Hans von Spakovsky a little later in the morning. And we'll continue to talk about our resolutions and what we hope to do in the coming year, because that's what today's all about. Happy New Year. It's O'Connor and Company at 5:54. Coming up, it's our 6 o'clock hour. And yes, we've got an update on the Minnesota fraud in the Somali community story. CNN on the case, of course. Going after the fraud? No. Going after the journalists who uncovered the fraud? Yes. That story and more coming up on this New Year's edition 2026 style of O'Connor and Company.